It's a really beautiful morning. I've got both my gun and my 3-prong. So we're gonna get out there past the reef and we're gonna pick off some of those invasive roy with the 3-prong. And then we're gonna take this gun out to the depths. Hopefully we'll score some monster.
I start paddling out and I spot these big fat lobster in a couple feet of water. The season's closed from May to August, but I still dive down and say hi. I spot this roy, so I awkwardly load up my 3-prong and get ready to dive down. I'm about to dive when the rubber snaps, so unfortunately it's going to be the gun only today. If you're curious how long those evolved rubbers will last you, I got mine 8 months ago and I kept it stored in a sealed plastic bag. I spot another roy, and this time I've got the gun loaded. Look at the conditions this morning. It is an absolute dream. I hit the bottom and then I crawl up to this rock on my left in order to conceal my body. I do a couple grunts to get things interested, and then I peek out over this rock. I see a moo to my left, and so I adjust myself. I go to line up my gun, but it's only loaded with 1/4 of the power for the roy, so I decide to go back up to the surface and load it up all the way, that way I can get one of these moo. I hit the bottom, and this time I've got the gun loaded. I tuck up behind this rock, and I'm trying to keep my body mostly hidden. That way the moo will get interested and come over. I do a couple grunts, and then I look all around. After a little while, I look over to the left, and I can see the moos getting interested. I hide my body even more and do some subtle scratches on the reef. I'm doing my best here to keep my body hidden and to avoid making eye contact, to try to draw the moo over, trying to pique his curiosity. He comes over, and I decide that I'm going to make a lunge for him. I swim out and I line up the shot. He turns away right before I shoot, and it does hit him, but it doesn't have enough power to go through, and he makes it off just fine. That was my first time ever getting close enough to a moo to take a shot on it, so even though I lost it, it still felt really amazing knowing that that's a fish that I'm able to catch. I spot this roy from the surface and I go down for the dive bomb. He slips away, but his friend isn't as wise. It's a perfect shot. I spotted a really bizarre looking structure from the surface, so I decided to dive down and see what it was. I hit the bottom, and you could see exactly what I'm talking about on my left there. I crawl forward over the reef, and it's pretty apparent now that this is a huge anchor. I don't know how long it takes coral growth to build up on a piece of metal like this, but for all I know, this could have been here 100 years. If anyone has a more informed guess, please let me know, but it's really cool to see. There's also a lot of fish on this section of reef, so even though I didn't shoot anything here, it was a really beautiful dive. I saw a big roy under this overhang in front of me, so I dive down on him. I get a little deeper and I kind of peek my head over this overhang, but he's nowhere to be seen. I know he couldn't have gone too far, so I start cruising forward, and I'm looking all around, hoping he'll come out. I start going back to the surface, and then I spot him in this cave, so I line up the gun and I dart forward. He's taking a long, hard look at me, and I got him. He starts cruising around and just gets all tangled up on this reef, so I just gotta let the gun go and dive back down there to retrieve him. When I hit the bottom, he darts back out through this cave and completely untangles himself. All I have to do is remove the rope from this one little piece of coral, and I'm ready to hang back up to the surface, so that was really awesome of him. This was a monster roy too, so I'm really happy I was able to take it off of the reef. I spotted some more roy under this ledge, so I dove down to do some cleanup. Another dive, another roy. This one pokes his head out, but I guess my spear had trouble going through his thick skull. I dive down on this big roy, but he gets wise to me and he darts off into this crack in the rocks. I'm about to head back up to the surface when this little one dives out of another crack, and he's on his own. His big buddies left him with me. He looks back at me and I line up the shot. I still have that huge roy from earlier, so I decide to do something I've never done before, and I chum it up. The chum starts working and it actually draws in a moo. So I get ready, I breathe up, and then I dive back down on it. I'm about to hit the bottom, and my camera battery died. My first ever moo, and it is a great size. It's a really big one, Unfortunately, my camera cut out right before I shot it, which is too bad, but I'm so stoked to have a fish like this. Lure are so difficult to catch, and it's so difficult to get them to come in close, and that chum worked wonders. I am really disappointed that my camera died when it did, because that was the most exciting dive of my entire short spearfishing career. After I shot my first ever moo, I started paddling up to the surface, and I saw a giant trevally below me whacking the chum, and then as I hit the surface, I looked back down to see a huge shark circling me. But I got the moo and I got out of there safely. Now let's pop this Roy. Alright, it's a new beautiful day, and I hit the bottom at about a quarter-mile offshore. As soon as I hit the bottom, I start making some grunts to hopefully pull some monsters out of the abyss. I look back to my left, and I see this huge ULUA rolling in. I slide my gun over, but by the time I get my gun to face him, he's already had enough of me, and he starts cruising back out into the ocean. I wasn't able to shoot him, but it was really cool to see him. That was my first time ever seeing an ULUA, and it's also really cool to know that my grunts can just pull him right out of the ocean and attract them to me. Look how beautiful this reef is. I didn't see anything that I wanted to shoot here, but it's just so gorgeous seeing all these fish. After drifting for a little while longer, I saw these fat OMILU. I dove down, but they started taking off. I did a couple grunts to try to get them to turn back towards me, but they were out of there. There were so many OMILU at this spot. This is another one that I saw coming out of this ledge here, and they were all ULUA size. I decide that this looks like a good place to take a drop, so I start diving down. I get a couple feet under, and then I decide I don't really like this spot, and I start heading up to the surface. As soon as I start heading up, this huge school of OMILU come rolling through, and these guys are big. I start flapping around to try and get back down, but my fins are on the surface and it ends up scaring them away. Eventually I breach the surface, and one cruises right under me. I line up the shot. Look how he's just bending my spear right there. This fish is big and he's got a lot of power. I start paddling back up to the surface, and I know I'm gonna have a fight on my hands. After a minute or so of fighting, he starts to get tired, but the spear also starts ripping through his back section. So I know I've got a limited amount of time to land this fish. He ends up getting tangled around this rocks and coral, and I know I need to dive down there quickly and untangle him. Otherwise, he'll use the tension to be able to break himself off of the spear. I dive down next to this queen nui, and look at these huge OMILU that come out from under the shelf. I was so close to them I could have almost hit him with the 3-prong. I tried to grab this guy's tail and end the fight early, but he's not having any of it. And that spear is so close to ripping out of him, I just go back and untangle the line from the rocks. At this point, he starts fighting again, and I realize that I need to land this fish right now, or he's gonna rip off and get away for good. So, even though the line's so close to ripping out of him, I decide this is the moment, I need to do it now, and I start pulling it in. He starts fighting against me, but luckily I had tired him out enough to the point where I was able to reel him in. I get him in close now, and I'm super nervous. That is barely holding on. He makes a couple more attempts to get away, but eventually I get him within grabbing distance. I get my hand on that tail, and then I just need to get that hand up into the gills. I get into those gills with my hand, and I feel amazing. This is my first ever ULUA, and it is such a beautiful fish. I'm just so excited here, and I got this beautiful queen nui watching the whole thing. I brain the fish to kill it in the quickest, most humane way possible, and now I can finally celebrate.
Oh my god.
I cut the gills to ensure that super high quality poke meat, and I have never seen this much blood in the water before, but I know that meat's gonna taste good on some rice. This is such a beautiful fish, and I feel so grateful and so proud that I was able to catch it. I've been eating it as poke for the last week or so now, and I am just so grateful that I'm able to go out into my front yard and get myself some food. I got back into shore, and I was lucky enough to find this sweet family who was willing to take a video of me.
Crazy. Oh my god.
It's nice, I can see what it sees too on like the
Oh, you
little screen
can?
on the front.
So you can kind of see what you like?
Yeah, it looks great.